Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are here today to speak about a topic that I think everyone has experienced before. We're here to talk about loneliness. This is our morning coffee for the soul that's going to happen every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the topic today, being that it's loneliness. Who has experienced the feeling of being lonely? What does that mean? How can we surpass this feeling? Because it's a feeling that brings a lot of hurt. It's a feeling that at the same time that the great authors, the great writers, the great songwriters, they all need some moments of solitude so their thoughts can be collected. We all need moments of solitude, of loneliness, for us to also listen to the words that we pray so much for. Sometimes we say all these prayers and we ask God for enlightenment, for answers, and we are so busy in our life that we forget to reserve some time to be attentive, to be in a quiet area, to really listen, to listen to the signs of what you should do, what kind of things you should choose in your life. So there is that kind of loneliness that is actually healthy. It's a kind of loneliness that we can all share, and we can all understand this type of loneliness. Now, there is a type of loneliness that we all do not like to experience. There is a type of loneliness that is so deep in our heart that it actually brings pain to us. I would like to talk about exactly both of these types of loneliness. I'm going to begin by reading a poem. It's not really a poem. To me, it's a poem. It's a very known Brazilian songwriter, a Brazilian singer, a Brazilian poet, and he talks a little bit about loneliness. This is what he has to say, and I think that we can all pay attention because we all fit in one of these things that he will say about loneliness. And here is what he has to say. I think it's really interesting, and we should all see where exactly we fit into this category. He says that loneliness is not a lack of people to talk, to date, to go out with, or to even have sex. This is desire. This is a want. Loneliness is not the feeling we experience through the absence of loved ones who can no longer return. This is nostalgia. This is that missing of one's company. Loneliness is not a voluntary retreat that one imposes oneself, sometimes to realign your thoughts. This is balance. Solitude or loneliness is not the involuntary cloister or seclusion that destiny imposes on us so we can review our life. This is a principle of nature. Loneliness is not the emptiness of people at our side. This is circumstance. Loneliness is much more than that. Loneliness is when we lose ourselves and look in vain for our soul. His name is Chico Buarque de Holanda, Francisco Buarque de Holanda. This is the author that wrote this. And it's very, very interesting because he talks about all kinds of loneliness, and the dictionary describes loneliness as this profound sensation of emptiness, this isolation, the sensation of disconnection. And at times we all do go through these sensations, through these fearful even moments of, I'm alone in this world, I have no one, or nobody understands me. And the feeling of not being understood perhaps is the most lonely feeling of all. Loneliness, the problem with it is that, in my opinion, it causes a lot of noise. Loneliness makes a lot of noise. In reality, when you're lonely, that's when you hear yourself, you hear your soul, you hear all of these things that you actually have to deal with, to really accept. So when we're lonely, this is the time where we are together with ourselves. And some people are terrified of being with themselves. We know that in prisons there are so many types of tortures. There's so many types of things that go on But one of the things that the prisoners mostly fear, what is that? It's to be in the solitary. When they go into that room where they are alone and they have no one, they have no sounds, they have nothing, that's when they're deprived of the most basic things that we need. We know that babies, when they don't get noise, when they don't get the touch, when they don't get any feelings, any connections, they're going to grow and have psychological problems. But this loneliness, a lot of prisoners say that they actually, a lot of them go crazy, let's say. A lot of them say that they hear noises, that they actually see things, that they actually are hallucinating in solitary confinement. But the problem is, a lot of that, it's their own thoughts, it's their own noise, their own internal that comes to life. So what is this loneliness that has nothing to do with the presence of people? And I don't know about you, but have you all experienced being lonely in the middle of a big party of a lot of people around? You can go to the most noisy, the busiest place. You can go to Manhattan, to Central Park, to Times Square, and all of that noise, all of these people, and yet you can feel very lonely. There are some types of loneliness that is kind of imposed on us. It's when you feel that you don't belong to a place. Sometimes you can be living in a place where you don't speak the language and you're with people that don't understand what you're saying, and you start to retreat and you start to feel a little lonely because you're not part of something. Sometimes it has to do with age, maybe. If you're an elderly person and you find yourself in a birthday party with a group of teenagers, you may not have much in common and you may feel a little lonely in that group. And these are just examples, but we all have moments that we don't feel that we belong to a group. And that's when we start retreating ourselves, which is usually a sign that something, that this connection that we talked about in the dictionary, that it says, sometimes is imposed loneliness. Someone that works at a lighthouse, they are going to be lonely. They're going to be alone, let's say. It's more important to say alone, because being alone is different than being lonely. If you are alone, you can be very well accompanied. You can be very well adjusted and be very happy with yourself. If you are your best company, then you're never going to be lonely. You can be alone, but you not necessarily are lonely. Sometimes it's prejudice that puts us in a lonely situation. When people look at you and they don't see as you belonging as part of the group because of the color of your skin, because of the way you walk, the way you look, the way you talk, and you start to get ostracized from a group, and that gives you that lonely feeling as well. So the thing is, you need to be enough for yourself. When the question on the book of the Book of the Spirits, question 766, when Allan Kardec asked if the social culture, the social life is something that is natural. Is the social life something natural? Is this something that we should partake? And of course that the answers that the spirits come to us is, of course, certainly. We are all given talents. We are all given this gift of being able to speak, to communicate. We are all given these gifts to hug, to talk, to explain, to look, to smile. All of these things are given to us in order for us to make use of it. So the person that retreats and puts all their gifts away is kind of walking away from this natural law that is the law of society. No one is made to be an island. And when we start being an island, we start with the question of depression, really. And what do you think? Do you think that depression causes loneliness, or does loneliness causes depression? And you guys are welcome to put anything in the comments. I see A few people here saying good morning, and you can always put your opinion, what you think, and participate. It's very welcome. I can read all the comments. So what do you think? Do you think that depression is a reason for someone to seclude themselves and be lonely? Or a person who is lonely can walk towards depression? And in reality, both are true. In reality, someone who is experiencing depression can very well seclude themselves. They don't want to be around. They want to take a step back. It's kind of a retreat to themselves, to be away from the world, to be away from it all. But then the person who is also lonely is doing much of the same thing. They are also taking themselves out of society. They're taking themselves out of the world. But then you can ask, but Deborah, I don't want that. Maybe I feel lonely, but I don't want to feel lonely. Well, it's interesting because Chico Xavier always said that a person, and Divaldo Franco also says the same thing, a person that is solitary is never solitary. And I like that phrase. One who is solitary will never be solitary. What we need to do is, what is making you lonely is usually that fear of being alone, a fear of not being well with yourself, of not knowing yourself enough, of not being your best friend. And that's why I tell you, friends, you have to be your best friend. You have to act in your best interest. That is not being selfish. That is loving yourself. When you look at yourself and you say, I love myself. I really like the person I am. You will never be lonely. It is when perhaps we put things in different places. When I put my love, when I put my like into material things, or the wrong people that maybe you're not appreciative, but I begin to depend on their love for me to be or feel loved, that is when we go on the wrong way of loneliness. I can't depend on anybody else to make me feel anyway, because you can't give that responsibility to anyone. In reality, would you want that responsibility? When your husband or your daughter or a friend says, you are my everything, and without you I am nothing, do you really want that responsibility of being everything to that person? Not really. We don't want that in our backs. We want them to be so full. We want people to be, I always talk about that story about You Complete Me. And there's a movie that a friend once told me. I never watched it yet. But she says, oh, that phrase, this woman or this man comes to the other and says, you complete me. And I said to her, what? You complete me? I don't like that. And she says, Deborah, aren't you romantic? And I said, well, think about it. For you to complete someone, you need to be less than complete. Correct? So when you complete someone, one person will be whole. And what's going to happen with the other person? They're going to take a lot of themselves out. So when we have two whole people that truly like themselves, that are enough for themselves, and they join together, then you will appreciate the other person, but you won't need them. You understand the difference of being half and half? That is a very romantic phrase. You complete me. But in reality, you have to be overfilled with the other person. Thank you, Weber. He said something. Keep up the good work. Thank you for watching and participating and being here. L.A. Sosa says good morning as well to all. Good morning to you too. So you have to really listen. When Kardec asked the spirits what you should do, to everything. What is pretty much the cure to everything? I like to say that. And he answers, know thyself. Just like, Socrates said way back when. And he said, know thyself. And when you know yourself, when you start to really paying attention to your wants, your needs, like that poem that we read, for you to know the difference between desire, nostalgia, balance, those things are all part of something that you need to know yourselves and know which one is fitting you at the moment. Perhaps it's not loneliness. Maybe you just want friends around. Well, sometimes people say, nobody calls me. And when we say, when have you called? And sometimes we want others to come to us. We want things to happen to us. But we don't do the work to also meet them halfway, or at least try. Chico Xavier said something very interesting, that it's impossible to be lonely in this world if you truly don't want to. And we know that when we do work for others, as Jesus said so many times, as far as charity goes, it's impossible. Because when you feel somebody else, you're feeling yourself. When you go to a nursing home, and I've been to many times visiting nursing homes, and I used to volunteer at a hospital. And when I brought my presence, and sometimes you see, you could be feeling so lonely, and you bring your loneliness to someone else, but you start giving them whatever it is inside of you, you immediately fill yourself up. So when I used to visit the sick in the oncology aisle, especially with children, with parents that are just waiting for someone to give them anything, a hug, a word, or just be there. It's impossible to feel lonely. And sometimes there's so much we can do out there that we just say, what can I do? How can I participate in the world? Once we participate, and I like to say participate in the world of this amazing society that we live. And sometimes people can have a very pessimistic look of society. And that's a choice. That's a choice we all have. To look at society as opportunities. Perhaps if you look at your loneliness as an opportunity, as a call to do something, you can do amazing things using that loneliness. Or using that moment where you're trying to discover yourself. Using that moment where, and we know in psychology, loneliness, there's a fear aspect to it. You are really fearful of being by yourself. And we could never be by yourself in a society so full of people. And people are crying. People are needing other people. Now think about it. How many people you talk to, but you really talk to? And not just that superficial conversation of, how are you? The weather's nice. But really ask them and say, hey, what was the moment that you mostly felt connected to the world? Or tell me something about your childhood. Was there a time in your childhood where you were a troublemaker? What did you do? And when we start getting to know people, we feel ourselves again. So being lonely is a condition that is actually a choice. And I don't say that to hurt anyone. That is the farthest thing I want to do. Because those who are experiencing loneliness, it's a feeling that's very, very hard on them. And the point is for those people to understand that, yes, I actually have control. I can actually do something about this. I can actually fill up other people. And once I fill them up, I am immediately filling myself up. And when I get to know myself, and when I make peace with my soul and with who I am, and when I put myself as my best friend, when I put myself as a person that I'm choosing to love, choosing to like, then it is impossible to go on with the loneliness. So choose that. Make yourself just wake up from that moment of loneliness and say, I want this to be actually an opportunity. I want this to be a calling. Maybe it's my calling to go out there and become someone who will visit people in hospitals, people in hospices. I will bring myself to the world. And trust me, the world will meet you halfway. I want you to know that also spiritually we're never lonely, and we all know that. There is not one person who is lonely. And there are so many kind spirits. Some call it guardian angels. But we always have the presence, and all we need to do is to call. And all we need to do is to call for Jesus' help and for these enlightened spirits to come and be with us and hug us and enlighten us and give us ideas. And if we stop and we listen long enough, we'll know what to do. I'm here to thank you now, everyone here at Kardec Radio. Thank you so much for this opportunity, friends. And I want to say to you that I hope to be here every Sunday. Of course, if there's an emergency or if I don't have internet available, I may not, but I'll do the show and I'll record it and bring it to you. If you have any ideas on new topics, any ideas on things that you want to hear, put the topic here and I'll talk about it. And again, make sure you listen to Kardec Radio. Make sure you listen to this beautiful station that brings us so much peace, that brings us so much hope. My name is Debora Beldowicz. You can all see me. I have a Facebook as well. If you have any questions, you can leave it here. You can leave it on my inbox in my personal Facebook. And again, thank you all so much for giving me this opportunity to be here this morning. And remember, you will not be lonely. You have yourself, the most important, the most beautiful person. God could have created anyone, but He created you. And God does not do anything in vain. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful Sunday.